Hi there, this is Tracy, and I'm an alter who has never come forward in a video before. I just wanted to come forward to introduce myself and to talk about the topic of social anxiety. Social anxiety is something that we experience in debilitating amounts due to our trauma in monarch mind control and human trafficking. And we want to talk about some reasons why we think we experience this and some things that we are doing to cope with it and to move forward with it. Of course, a main reason we experience this is anxiety itself. We were terribly traumatized, which left us in a state of constant fear. And that fear applies itself to a lot of things. But one of the primary things is our social relationships. We think a big reason why this is because we have seen what people are capable of. We have watched people murder each other in the worst kinds of ways, commit the most heinous human atrocities imaginable. So we are aware on a personal level of what people are capable of, some people at least. But we're also aware of what your typical average so-called good person would do when pushed hard enough. And we're also aware that it doesn't take that much to push people into sadistic behavior with each other. Most people don't resist mind control to the level that we did. And so this is what we've found, is that your average person may not be a violent offender now, but push them a little bit, and you might be surprised at what they would do, what they're capable of doing. And we tried not to have too much judgment towards others for this, but our point in sharing this is that because we've seen this in action, because we understand this, it causes us to be extremely frightened of other people. We read people very well, and we look for their worst traits and what we think they would be capable of and under what kinds of pressure. And we steer clear of anyone that we don't approve of in that way, anyone that we think would be a threat to us in that way. I don't know if this is making sense. We have a kind of interesting way of evaluating people to see how safe they are. And the conclusion we come to is that most people aren't safe. And we know that it's not that black and white, but we are a traumatized part of the system, and so we look for the worst in people, and we run away when we think it's too much. So that often just kills any social interaction we could have with people before it starts. We also think that just having polyfragmented DID plays a part in this. While polyfragmented DID helps us to cope with our fears, it also causes us to be super self-conscious of our behavior and of our switches. One of the symptoms of our mind control programming is that we twitch, and our head jerks when we switch states or when we're nervous, but typically it's a sign of us switching. And we're very self-conscious of our muscle spasms, of our tics, and of the way that our facial expressions constantly shift when we're standing and listening to someone. We find that we constantly switch states as we listen to others, and that our face changes with it, and sometimes it looks pretty weird. And we're very, very afraid of people noticing that we're switching. We're very afraid of people not understanding what it is and thinking that there's something wrong with us. We just have a lot of self-consciousness around the way that our polyfragmented DID manifests in social situations. We are also constantly terrified of getting too triggered and having panic attacks. We think that our fear of panic attacks that leads us to avoid social situations and spend an extreme amount of time isolated at home is probably a symptom of agoraphobia. We haven't been diagnosed with agoraphobia, but we definitely think that we have it. We just haven't spoken of it because we try not to self-diagnose publicly. But we definitely have the symptoms of agoraphobia as listed in the DSM. So that's a thing. And we also have a whole thing which kind of fits that with our partner, who we consider our safe person, and various things we have around that. Hold on. Sorry for the background noise. He's actually out in the kitchen making food right now. That's why we're in the back room. And it's triggering us and distracting us, so we need a moment. But yeah, we have agoraphobic tendencies, that's definitely for sure. And we think that the reason we don't experience it to the debilitating degree that some people do is because of our DID, that we structurally dissociate and have dissociated in order to cope with it. We were forced to be around people almost 24 hours a day, basically 24 hours a day, 7 days a week in the mind control. And we also displayed agoraphobic tendencies since we were a small child. So I think that we have programming that kept us from descending into full-blown agoraphobia. But there's definitely a period of time when we were 12 and 13 where we spent almost our entirety of our time in our room in the dark alone, doing drugs and playing video games while our mother delivered meals to us. And this was a setup as part of our dysfunction reprogramming, but it was something that we took to naturally, meaning that we were horrified to be in the mind control. We were overjoyed to be able to do what we needed to do at the time, which was to sit alone in a room, do drugs, do heroin, among others, and play horror video games. That was comfortable to us. Obviously, what we needed was actual help and to get out of the situation we were in, but at the time, that was the best case scenario we could think of. So we went with that programming very heavily, which now makes us very sad because it's resulted in a lot of issues for us, including, we think, it's contributed to our social anxiety. Of course, part of the issue we have in association to agoraphobia is fear of humiliation. So it's the fear of having panic attacks and not being able to escape, not being able to leave, and also of the social humiliation of having a panic attack, becoming hysterical, and not being able to leave. We remember a very frightening incident when we were staying in a homeless shelter, and while we were at the bus stop with some people waiting, we started getting very triggered by what they were talking about. I don't remember what they were talking about, but we started to get extremely overwhelmed, and we kind of snapped, and we said to everyone, I said, we're having a panic attack and we can't move. Can you guys please stop talking for a minute so that we can calm down? We were very upset, but we asked them, politely. And this one lady started mocking us and getting closer to us and making us feel trapped and confined and refusing to stop talking. And these other guys started flipping out on us, and telling us, no, we're not going to stop talking. And so it escalated to the point where we were in a state of such overwhelming terror and we were physically blocked in. We couldn't get up and move because we were frozen in fear. And these people were standing around us kind of in a circle, like a half circle. And we felt very small and very dissociated. And they kept talking and kept triggering us and we couldn't move. And finally we screamed at everyone, can you please just stop, and screamed. At which point this one dude who was very abusive in the shelter to a lot of people, just an absolute nightmare of a human being, flipped out and told us he was calling the cops because we scared his dog. His dog was there. I don't remember his dog reacting. I don't remember anything happening with that. I don't know. But he flipped out and he started to call the police on us for yelling when our boundaries were violated, And yeah, like I said, it was a homeless shelter. So obviously the people that we were with were not very functional and most of them were addicted and some of them were abusive. And so it was pretty rough. But that was an example of a situation where we literally couldn't handle what was going on. And we snapped, and it was humiliating for us, although now we just think it was really sad that the people there reacted so abusively because that was not right. But, our fear of those sorts of things happening, that's that's not even our worst nightmare. We have much, worse fears. But that sort of thing is the perfect example of what we are afraid of happening in public. So we avoid group situations. We when we do have friends, we try to stay one-on-one with people. Being a cult survivor and being a survivor of ritual group shaming, ritual humiliation, we don't like social groups. We don't like being in any kind of clique. We don't like having multiple friends who are all friends with each other. A big reason for that also is because of our DID and our switches. We still have different alters that come out for different people. And as it is, we've actually found that so exhausting with our integration process and so difficult to maintain that right now we only have online friends other than our partner. And then there's some neighbors in our apartment complex who we're friendly with. And that's kind of the place that we've started, trying to rebuild ourselves socially. We are in a small town that does not support us making friends. There's really no communities of people here that we wish to be a part of. Like we say, we avoid groups, but we still like to go to certain places that are kind of meetups for certain people so that we can meet individual people who share our interests. So like, for example, an LGBT meetup or an LGBT center, that's the kind of place that we would go a few times when capable and try to make friends that we could then hang out with one-on-one. So that's kind of how we do it. But there's no forum here to do that. There's no queer community at all. There's no metal or punk scene. There's very few mental health resources. It's not a place conducive to this for us, to making friends. So what we're doing is we're just starting with our apartment complex. We've been here several months and we now have enough presence, and we've worked hard enough at it that we feel able to mildly socialize with a couple of people here. Yeah, it's really just a long process for us. Because of all this, we don't work. We don't work because of the panic attacks and PTSD. We don't plan to work. And we've actually been unable to get on disability or even try too hard to get on disability. Last time we tried to do that was a few months ago. We were going to start by getting on general assistance on welfare on their disability track, which is going to help us get onto disability. And we got yelled at by an extremely sassy ghetto caseworker, which was kind of our worst nightmare. She went fucking ballistic on us because we tried to reschedule an appointment. The whole thing was crazy. I don't want to go too much into it. It was just nuts. I think I talked about it in a video I did called Abusive Doctors Case Survivor Rant. That was about an abusive doctor I had just seen, but I also mentioned that experience with the caseworker also. And since then I've frozen. I've completely shut down. My partner offered to go in and do the interviews for me, to be like my, I don't know what the word is, like you can have someone speak for you, like represent you in trying to get benefits if you are too disabled to, which with my panic disorder I think would be appropriate, but I felt too shut down to even do the paperwork for that. I tried to fill it out and it was just too much. So that's how it is for me. It's really that black and white. I shut down. If I try to do something and someone becomes abusive to me about it, I will shut down around the entire thing for several months or years sometimes. It's just extremely slow going, rebuilding with my system, because when I get triggered, I get flooded with such high fear and I dissociate so badly sometimes that like my system can't even touch the alters in question. They can't even go into their systems or even talk to them to try and help them for a long time, or at least it takes a very long time to do so. So it's very frustrating for us, and we've learned that we just can't even try. We can't try to deal with bureaucracies right now. One thing that we're trying to prepare ourselves to do that we've been avoiding for months is we have to, actually years, the last like 2 years, there's a particular phone call that we've needed to make that involves us sending a fax to an agency. We even wrote it all out almost a year ago, but we were not able to make the long walk to go and fax it. I mean, it's really ridiculous, like how shut down we get. And that will enable us to move forward with some things we need to do in order to get mental health services. Something now is expired that's requiring us to do this whole thing. Before then, we could kind of evade it, but now we have to if we want to get any mental health services. It's just a nightmare for us. Therapy is a nightmare for us. We've had the worst experiences with therapy, and I think we should make a video soon in which we talk about our psychotherapy horror stories. We saw a video by a guy, I think it was Spartan Life Coach, we really like. He's a narcissistic abuse specialist who has some cool videos, and I saw a title of one of his videos the other day. It says Psychotherapy Horror Stories. We have a lot of those. A lot of it is because we're a survivor of mind control, and we were sent to mind control programmers who were posing as therapeutic help. But we've also just seen some crazy people outside of that situation. And so every single time we go through abuse with therapists, it becomes increasingly more difficult to go back. We have not stopped trying, but it's very, very hard. Oh, I'm getting anxious thinking about it. So I'm going to shift the focus of this to self-care. I think my video is actually going to time out in a second. So I'm going to do this in 2 parts. I'm going to end here, and then I'm going to record another video later talking about what I do to cope. Thank you.